a little weird to me that Rabbi Gold, who I have had the schus of knowing on a very intimate level for the last 25, 26 years, asked me to please speak at a book launch that he is doing for tremendous Torah that he is putting into writing and bringing down into this world. Rabbi Gold is somebody that I have, for the last 26 years, literally looked up to, as he was the Rav of my grandparents, Aleim Shalom, who, one of my biggest treats were going and visiting my grandparents in Har Nof, and the love and passion that he showed my grandparents on an ongoing basis. But me and my siblings and my parents, whenever we came to visit my grandparents, is something that continues in my heart every single day that I see Rabbi Gold. It's no secret that Rabbi Gold for many years has been teaching here at the OU and has been running the Avram Silver College that we are extremely proud of, and has, honestly, if I had to sit down and count the amount of people and shiurim that Rabbi Gold has given just here from this one spot, it would be a tremendous chus to anybody in the world to just accomplish what Rabbi Gold accomplished from this one spot, let alone what he's doing all over. But as a Talmud of Rav Gold, and as a person that tries to look at Klal Yisrael and the challenges that we are dealing with on a daily basis, I say to myself, why is it that this room is packed with people coming to hear Rabbi Gold and coming to literally be the first ones to grasp onto his incredible sefer? And I say to myself that there is a certain uniqueness in Rabbi Gold's Torah that matches up with his and his family's life. It's a Torah of emes. It's a Torah that you don't just say a vart unless it is boiling inside you. You don't say a chiddush in the Torah unless you are feeling it in your gut. You know, Rabbi Gold has, Baruch Hashem, a beautiful and funny way of giving over things. But it is his heart and neshama that are intertwined with the Torah that he is giving over that really make it so special for every single one of us to sit down and listen to his Torah and to learn his Torah. I was sitting in Los Angeles literally a week and 3 days ago, and I had about an hour and a half between meetings, and I said to myself, you know something, let's start preparing for Purim. I didn't have much Sfarim on me. I went on to RabbiShalomGold.com, and I listened to Rabbi Gold shir on the Malbim on Megillas Esther. I kid you not, the second the shir was over, my phone rings, it's Rabbi Gold calling. In Los Angeles, right or wrong, Rabbi?
Right on.
Now, clearly he has connections way above what I could ever hope for. But it's one thing to be thinking about me when I'm in Los Angeles. But it's another thing to know exactly when I finish the shir, to know to call me, and not to interfere me in the middle of the excitement of the shir. But it's that excitement that when you sit in Los Angeles or a place that's not Yerushalayim, that you need to grasp onto that Torah at Eretz Yisrael, that Torah that is so full of emotion that Rabbi Gold is able to bring around the world. And Rabbi Gold, it's an absolute honor to have been your Talmud for 26 years already, the Chenvaiter till 120, my 120. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless you and Rebbe Tzin Gold and the rest of the family with tremendous hatzlacha, health, and yiddish nachas from your children, from your grandchildren, there should be great-grandchildren, and all of your children that are sitting here with you. Thank you very much for everything.
I have to say that I'm overwhelmed by the number of people here and the quality of the people, old friends and friends and students. It's really very beautiful, and I'm deeply moved. I mean, this is my first book launch, It's taken a long time in coming. I hope that in Yid Hashem I like it so much. I hope we'll get another few songs on. We are working on 3 more right now. The Rabbi Hashem should give us gesund and arichas yomim to be able to get it done. And well, 2 weeks ago, one of my married grandchildren calls me and he tells me in Hebrew, Saba, ha'alchacha hachi tova. Saba, the greatest proof that you succeeded in life, ein af neched echad sheyachol likro et hasefer shelcha. Not a single one of your grandchildren can read your book. He's right, but there's a 12-year-old in Ramat Beit Shemesh that's fighting his way through it. There's another one who's come now to the house so that Savta should teach him how to read English. It may be that in the next 20, 30 years, because of the book, I'll get them to read English, but ultimately what we're really working on is somebody to translate the book. I'm not a historian. I'm an amateur. I only tell my story. But now I may have certain advantages over historians. Great historians don't always get it right. Because I remember one of the first things that I learned in college was absolute and pure objectivity simply doesn't exist. Everybody comes to whatever task it is that he undertakes. He comes with his likes and his dislikes, his biases, his prejudices, his mishigasin. All of this comes to the fore. The classic example, of course, is one who is considered certainly one of the greatest historians of the 20th century, the last century. Sir Arnold Toynbee. Arnold Toynbee was a goyen, great historian. He traced, he discovered, maybe he even invented 21 different civilizations. And he traced these civilizations from infancy, from the struggle to survive, to growth, finally rising to strength, conquest, reaching the very peak of power, and then inexorably the decline, the decay, the deterioration, the disintegration, the demise, and the disappearance. Now, all of these civilizations followed precisely the plan that had been set out for them by Toynbee, except one. There was one pesky little people around who, according to Toynbee, should long ago have been dead and have disappeared, and they still kept popping up all around the place. The Jews. Now, he could have resolved his terrible problem with the Jews by simply saying, well, every rule has an exception to the rule. But I don't think he was ready to say that the Jews are an exceptional people. So he came up with a brilliant approach to the existence, the stubborn existence of the Jewish people on the face of this earth. And what he came up with was the idea that every civilization leaves behind shards, pottery, all sorts of evidence that they once existed. So he said, the Jews that you see walking around, these are the fossils, the leftovers of a civilization that's about to reach the point of disappearance. And any day now, it's going to be all over. Fossils are fossils. And they do what fossils are supposed to do. Die. Then came an awesome day. May 14th, 1948. Hey Iyar. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a Friday. The state was declared in Tel Aviv. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. By the way, some of my religious friends have never taken note of the fact that the state was born in an act of great sanctification of God's name. Because the British were supposed to leave Friday night at midnight. They advanced it by 6 hours so that those who were present should be able to make it home before Shabbos. Understand? First, Yom HaTzmaut, Kedushat HaShabbat, those Tzionim, those Chilonim, those Zionists. Incidentally, you may have a good time if you go Google and remember, our Prime Minister said in Washington, just Google. He said you'll find out everything if you Google. So I tell you, if you'll Google sometimes Independence Days, so they have a list, I think, of 196 different Independence Days of all the countries in the world. Big countries, little countries, verschlungene countries, dictatorships, places that I didn't even know ever existed, Life was much easier before the Second World War. There were a handful of countries in the world, and that's it. But no, I don't know all the countries. Anyway, you will notice that nearly every country in the world, except one line is the Independence Day. France, July 1st. America, July 4th. You come to Israel, they need 3 lines. Because it's the only Independence Day in the world that keeps moving during the week because of Shabbos. If Shabbos was, it's only another. If Shabbos is not, and they tell you it's a little confusing, but it's the only Independence Day that's movable. It moves because it depends on its proximity to Shabbos. Another shtickle, Kiddush, Shem Shamayim, and the world. But all right. The important thing is we're still talking about Toynbee. I haven't forgotten. We're talking about Toynbee. Toynbee had a problem with the Jews, and the problem became an impossible one to deal with on the 14th of May, 1948. Because on record, there was never in all of history a fossil that created a state, fought off 7 invading armies, and became what the state of Israel became. So he had a problem with the Jews. So he dealt with it most probably the way his bias dictated. And he decided, he came up with that terrible, terrible equation that what Nazis were to Jews, Jews have become to Palestinians. And it was all based on Har Nof, the supposed Deir Yassin massacre. The supposed Deir Yassin massacre. In other words, his Sinas Yisrael came through. I'm not going to go into, you can Google that and find out the great debate that took place in McGill University. He was challenged to a debate, because this may be talking politics a few days before the elections. He was challenged to a debate by Israel's ambassador to Canada by the name of Yaakov Herzog, Olav Shalom, uncle of him. I don't want to talk politics. I'll tell you, I had an interesting incident with Yitzchak Herzog. Remember a few months ago, there was in the great synagogue, there was the shloshim for the three boys. I came late, and I make my way all the way up to the front over there, and I'm looking for a seat. And I see there's one seat all the way up front. So there's a seat. I need a seat. So I go sit down in the seat. And I take a look at the fellow sitting next to me. He said, "You're the head of the opposition?" "Yeah." "You're Yitzhak Herzog?" "I got smeared from your grandfather." Where did you see my grandfather? By the way, it's in the book. Not this story, but that I got smeared from his grandfather, Yitzhak Isaac Halevi Herzog, a great man. And that's, you even have it in the book, you even have the text of the smear that he gave. But I'm going far afield. He was just thrilled. He wanted to know. I was in the house. Yeah, I was in the house on Eben Ezra, the corner of Eben Ezra and Karen Kayemet. Oh, I was there a number of times. And there's a fascinating story about his father in the book. Whenever I say the book, it means, you know, which book. Anyway, we're talking about Toynbee. The fact that one is an historian is absolutely no guarantee that he understands history or that he knows how to interpret it. The purpose of the book really was my story, because my grandchildren, who it turns out can't read it, they wanted to know the story. But it's also because the last 70 years have been the most awesome period in the history of any people on the face of this earth. There's nothing like it. And the worst tragedy is if somebody's not tuned in and doesn't feel how historic it is. Now, I'm going to take you through what I consider a number of approaches to history that are all related to this. I'd say the first rule is the present can only be understood with the backdrop of the past. If you don't have past, you are lost. You cannot begin to understand what's happening. These words are dedicated to our former president. Shimon Peres said on a number of occasions, "The past bores me." Anybody who can say that the past bores me don't get it. I'll give you an example. I've been gobbling up all of the articles about Benjamin Netanyahu's speech last week before Congress. I have read idiocy, nonsense, stupidity, good stuff. I'll tell you, I watched it from beginning to end. And I'll tell you exactly what was going through my mind as I watched him speaking. My mind went back to October 6th, 1943. What happened on October 6th, 1943? On October 6th, 1943, 400 rabbis came to Washington. Orthodox rabbis. Rabbi Feinstein was there. Rav Soloveitchik was there. Onei Olam, 400. And most of them they were all, nearly all European born. Boston Rabbi was there. All right, we have. And you see it, you Google it, you'll see 400 rabbis marching from Union Station. Even the one who reads the proclamation is heavily accented. They most probably didn't have an American-born rabbi to read it. 400 rabbis. Who cared about it? Roosevelt wouldn't see them. Fast forward 73 years later, both houses of Congress and the whole world listen to a prime minister of the state of Israel. What an awesome difference! Anybody who doesn't have that picture in their mind has absolutely no way to understand the significance of a Prime Minister of Israel speaking before the two houses of Congress. And by the way, there were a lot of other things that happened then. There were so many requests made of the State Department to bomb the rail lines to Auschwitz. Who listened? Henry Feingold, in his book, The Politics of Rescue, says the following. John J. McCloy, Assistant Secretary of the Army, was the one who replied to the request for the bombing of the rail lines to Auschwitz. And he says, John J. McCloy's response is one of the most tragic documents to come out of the Holocaust. One paragraph is all he quotes. After a study, McCloy says, it becomes apparent that such an operation could be executed only by diversion of considerable air support essential to the success of our forces now engaged in decisive operations elsewhere, and would in any case be of such a doubtful efficacy that it would not warrant the use of our resources. But wait, here's the sentence. Here's the sentence. There has been considerable opinion to the effect that such an effort to bomb the rail lines, even if practicable, might provoke more vindictive action by the Germans. What more vindictive action than Auschwitz was there? What's the State Department talking about? Oh, we might get them upset if we bomb the rail lines. Who knows what they're going to do after that? Most tragic document to have emerged from the Second World War. You can't understand Netanyahu in Congress without knowing what took place more than 70 years before that. I'll tell you, I didn't say it so clearly in the book because I was afraid it would be a little pompous. You have to be a little bit of an on-off. There is a story in the book about June 13th. June 13th, 1995. The background to that story is we had already demonstrated against Oslo across the country. We stood on the highways and the byways, big signs. Eretz Yisrael, V'sakona Eretz Yisrael's in grave danger. Al titnu lehem rovim, don't give them rifles. And by Pesach time of 1995, there was nothing left that we could do here in Eretz Yisrael. So a number of us came up with the idea that the scene is shifting to Washington and that we should create a march on Washington. We planned it in an apartment in Kiryat Moshe, but we didn't want it to be known that this is an Israeli operation. We wanted to make sure that this will be seen as American citizens, American rabbis are coming to lobby their congressmen and senators against this agreement with the PLO unless they comply with all of the provisions of the Oslo Accords. So here it is. We moved from the apartment in Kiryat Moshe, and then it ended up, our next command post was a basement in Borough Park. My sister-in-law's brother, Heshi Perlstein, all of our Shalom, lived on 48th Street, was it 1448, 48th Street, something like that. And in his basement, the conspirators met. We put in close to 2 months of work. I was joined by an assistant mayor today, an assistant mayor of Yerushalayim, Dov Kalanovich, Yosef Friedman from Bethel, and Yedidya Atlas. And we brought on June 13th, 150 rabbis came to Washington. And we spent a day. Now, I'm going to now pull a classic Netanyahu. It's not Elie Wiesel, but one of the rabbis who was there on that march is here today, tonight. Rabbi Neil Winkler and his wife, Rabbi Neil Winkler, is an Oleh Hadash. He came here from, he was the rabbi of the Young Israel of Fort Lee. And he and Rabbi Pruzensky were the two fighters for Israel who were really our arm here there in the United States of America. We brought 150 rabbis to Washington, and it was a really tremendous act. The pompous part that I don't think I put in the book, but I did cross it out. That in 43, Rabbi Silver brought 400 rabbis, and in 93, Rabbi Gold brought 150. It would have been a good line. What's significant is the ability to look at the present. You have to look at it through the prism of the past. There are two things that guarantee, I look like a tough guy. Well, he's a tough guy already. When you're past 50, that's the end. You become mush. So there are two things that can get me running for the Kleenex, And I saw it just recently in a sefer by Hanan Porat, a picture of the Jews trudging through the snow across the Alps, leaving their DP camps in order to walk to the Mediterranean in the hope that they'll get onto some unseaworthy boat to take them to Eretz Yisrael. It's an awesome picture. See long lines. They're going to walk if they have to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, I don't have much patience for the many people who I speak to in the United States. It's Israel, it's Tzigani to Medina. The other picture that gets me is that you can see it, it's on YouTube, you can Google it also. Israeli planes flying symbolically over Auschwitz. Guaranteed, I burst out into tears. The present, the awesome present of the Jewish people has meaning and significance in direct relationship to the past. If you know the past, you can appreciate it, and we have to teach it to our young people. They don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. They think like the Medina was always here. And if anything, they have complaints. So the past is very, very, very important. I'll tell you, I was tempted maybe for 5 seconds or maybe 3. There was a publisher who was ready to publish my book on condition that I take out 1 page. Remove 1 page. What page? So I could let you go home and read through the book and start calling me day and night which page. And there's a page someplace in the book which I write that I have, I don't remember the exact words even, I have little patience with people who trivialize Yom HaAtzmaut. They don't have a clue. They don't get it. They come up with their silly jokes. They don't understand the power and the meaning and the significance of the day. The Rabbi Shalom gives Klal Yisrael Eretz Yisrael. Unbelievable. should be a day of great joy for everybody. They walk around like they lost their best friend. Tisha B'Av is happier. The truth is, I don't think I thought for 3 seconds. And I told him, absolutely not. I'm not taking that page out of the book. I'll go find somebody else. Tell Elon that I found Geffen, you understand? Geffen publisher didn't demand of me that I should take that page out. It's the past. It's the past that gives meaning to the present. And by the way, it's the halacha. The halacha of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim telling the story. On the night of Pesach, so the Mishnah says it, Matchil beginut u'mesagem b'shevach. You have to begin with the unsavory and unhappy part of Jewish history, and then you talk about the great praise. And there's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Do you begin with Avodah Mayinu, we were slaves to Paro, and God took us out? Or do we go all the way back earlier and we say, our forefathers were idolaters? All the way back to Avraham. And we do both. You can't start a story and they lived happily ever after. Just as it's impossible to understand June of 1967 without having experienced May of 1967. The growing fear, the crowds in Cairo and Damascus, death to the Jews. The noose tightening around Eretz Yisrael, the straits of Tehran are closed. Foreign airlines stopped flying to Eretz Yisrael. I had a friend from Eretz Yisrael that got onto the last plane. First, he ran to the Rebbe. He told the Rebbe, I can get onto the last flight. Should I go? Should I go? The Rebbe told him, get on the plane. And he got onto the last flight, came back to Eretz Yisrael. The noose tightened around. Nobody did anything. Nobody did anything. I started rereading one of the great books. Eliezer Berkowitz's Faith After the Holocaust. The first paragraph in his book is the following. The main thesis of this volume was worked out during the critical weeks that led up to the Six-Day War between Israel and the Arab nations, and was completed during those drama-filled 6 days. The last word of its heart, of this great book, Faith After the Holocaust, was written practically when the last shot was fired in that war. It was written under almost unbearable tension and against darkest fears and anxieties. The threat of another Holocaust was hanging over the Jewish people. This destruction would have been final for all of Israel the world over, not only for the Jewish people in the state of Israel. Our generation could not have survived another Holocaust, and certainly not this one. There's a threat to all of Israel today. And politicians are involved in such pettiness. It's a sham and a charpa for all of history. When somebody will write one day what some of our politicians were talking about and thinking about while a great threat hangs over this country, 6.5 million Jews, and how they reacted to a prime minister who represents those 6.5 million Jews. It's a shanda. They don't get it. They don't get it. there's a second law, a second rule of how to deal with history. And this is already a painful one, very painful to deal with this one. And that is that we are awash in a sea of falsehood. There are lies that have become basic and fundamental to all of our thinking. And nobody knows the difference. A book recently was written by a fellow Ben Dror Yemini called Ta'asiyat Hashkarim, The Industry of Falsehood. One chapter that blew my mind away. The right of return. Do you understand? Palestinians have right of return. In the aftermath of the Second World War, 60 million people were refugees. Muslims, Hindus, Germans, Christians, Greeks out of Cyprus, out of Turkey. 60 million people were moved, and not a single one has claimed the right of return. And the world knows that if there would be a right of return, we would destroy the world within a week. The war and the bloodshed, there is no such thing. So therefore, India and Pakistan, they took their incoming refugees and they became part of the host country. Germans went back to Germany. I don't know, Slavs went here, Estonians went there. Only one people on the face of this earth are refugees forever. It's all one big lie. Doesn't exist. There's nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. The whole world is caught up in lies. Apartheid, I mean, but I'll tell you, I particularly have problems with the lies that continue to fester within our good Yiddish fromme community. And I say this out of pain. Don't anybody come to me and tell me I'm bashing this or I'm bashing that one. I'm bashing only the people who have caused terrible strife. And they've cost us lives. I can only speak in brief terms. I don't have the time for. There are two people in the 20th century who were the greatest of visionaries. If we would have heeded the word of those two people, millions of Jews would have been saved. Binyamin Zev Herzl and Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. Herzl was right. Herzl was right. I'm ready to challenge anybody who's going to come up with any of their silly stories, their nonsense, their shtorim. Oh, he wanted to make everybody Christian. Let me read something from his Herzl's diary. Shtuyot that are believed by thousands of people. 7 years later, in 1904, 6 months before his death, Herzl was granted an audience with the Pope. In utter violation of the strict rules of protocol and the instructions he had received in advance by those who had arranged the meeting, Herzl did not kneel and did not kiss the Pope's outstretched hand. First person in history, most probably, to have defined the Pope that way. And he wrote in his diary, I believe that I incurred his displeasure by this, for everyone who visits him kneels down and at least kisses his hand. Herzl was fully aware of the historical, unprecedented nature of this meeting. At this confrontation between the authentic Israel and those who claimed to have supplanted it, the Pope expressed staunch opposition to the Zionist enterprise. The Pope said to him, The Jews have not recognized our Lord, therefore we cannot recognize the Jewish people. Hence, the conflict between Rome, this is Herzl writing, the conflict between Rome, represented by him, and Jerusalem, represented by me, was once again opened up. All right? There's another beautiful, beautiful little paragraph in his diary. There was one day that he had a meeting with the papal nuncio in Vienna. He says, at 10 in the morning, at 10 I arrived at the nuncio's quarters on the Amhof Square. Looking around furtively, he describes how he went into the residence of the papal nuncio, looking around furtively like a man entering a house of ill repute. I must record this feeling here because it was the most noteworthy one. Anyone who saw me enter there could easily have misunderstood my errand. And then a third example, and this one upsets me. There's somebody who writes in Hamodia that repeated the same lie about Herzl twice in 6 months, the same paragraph. Listen. Nobody can start out with me about the Jerusalem Post. I can tell you Daf and Omid. You can't start out with me about the Hamodia either. Here is the oft-told story, and she says it. When Herzl arrived in Yerushalayim, when Kaiser Wilhelm was here, he was Mechalel Shabbos, and he was put into Cheder. Let's hear how Herzl describes his arrival. It's unbelievable. We took the train in the frightful heat. It was a train that left Yaffo that morning, Friday morning. We took the train in the frightful heat to Jerusalem. Just the departure from the Jaffa station took an hour. Sitting in the cramped, crowded, scorching compartment was torture. While crossing the dismal, desolate countryside, I developed a fever and grew more and more feverish and weak as we rode further into the Sabbath. For because of the delayed train and to Wilson, who was associate, extreme chagrin, we found ourselves traveling into the Sabbath. The moon was full when we arrived in Jerusalem. The man's honesty is unbelievable. I would have gladly driven the half-hour's distance from the station to the hotel, but the gentleman made long faces, so I had to resign myself to walking into the city, weak with fever though I was. I tottered all over the place on my cane. With my other arm, I braced myself alternately against Wilson on one hand and Shub on the other hand. This is the great Chil Shabbos of Herzl as he comes into Yerushalayim. I sent the letter the first time it appeared in the Hamodia. They paid no attention to me, so I didn't write the second one. Is that the only? But sometimes they're very honest. There was extreme honesty last week in Bar Kehillah. Where is it? That was a beautiful, beautiful one. In Bar Kehillah, they had an article in which they described the first elections in the country, 1949, the first elections in the country. And they described that there was a big placard, like, you know, the stuff that you have on the walls in Yerushalayim. There was a kol koreh calling on everybody to go out and vote. The kol koreh was signed by 200 rabbis. Amongst them, I'm quoting Bar Kehillah, gold doesn't make up anything. And who was there? Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was the Rav of Yerushalayim. The Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, Rabbi Chatzkel Sana. You'll read the book and you'll see that I knew them both. The Rosh Yeshiva of Sfas Emes, and then Magan Hagon Rabbi Yosef Shalom and Yashiv. You'll read that part too. That's a real good part of the book. Okay, that's good. What did it say in this great proclamation calling on everybody to go out and vote, the proclamation said the following: Know that Hashem Berov Rachamot Chasod, we thank God for His great mercy and His kindness. Al Shezochinu, that we have been worthy lidot et hanitzanim harishonim, the first sprouting of Atchalta de Geula, the 230 words. Atchalta de Geula, the beginning of redemption. Im hakamata shel Medinat Yisrael, with the establishment of the state of Israel. 200 Gedolei Yisrael signed that. And there we have no record of anybody saying, what, me? I didn't sign that. I didn't know it said that. No. That's exactly how they saw it. But the guys 67 years later, they're smarter. They know better. In the book I described my own feeling that Friday. I'll never forget it. It was 2 weeks before my bar mitzvah. Our family used to daven at Yeshiva Torah Das, 206 Wilson Street, between Lee and Division. We lived around the corner on Division Avenue at 218 Division Avenue. I was born in the Williamsburg Maternity Hospital. Nobody even knows that there is a Williamsburg Maternity Hospital. It was there long enough for me to be born there, and then I think it became a shtibel or something else. Right? And I remember coming into shul that Friday. That Friday I come into shul. And in the middle of mincha, somebody comes running in and yells out, President Truman recognized the state of Israel. You could feel the excitement in the air. So I'm not interested in anybody 67 years down the line tell me how to feel or how to look at it. Here were 200 Gedolei Yisrael who lived the moment. They tell us what it's all about. So why am I the only flag on Yom Ha'atzmaut on my block in Harnov? Why is it that every year I lose 1, 2, or 3 flags off my car? And we keep buying more and more. There's a lot more, but I'm going to start winding down because I can keep going. I can keep going for hours. The sheker, the falsehood, is that which we have to beware of. We have to beware of it. I remember myself reading 2 years in a row in Yated Ne'eman, full page, the story of Rav Kook's speech at the opening of the Hebrew University. And I remember also somebody once came to me with a tape of a young Rosh Yeshiva in this city who told his students, you should know, Rav Kook couldn't see further than his nose. Here, at the opening of the Hebrew University in April of 1925, Sir Herbert Samuel was there, Lord Balfour came, 5,000 people. Rav Kook said about the Hebrew University, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah udvar Shem Yerushalayim. He couldn't see further than his nose. The same story appeared twice, 1 year after the next. Here is a matter of public record. The speech is available. You can read the speech. He never said it. They made it up. The speech was courageous and brilliant. He told the 5,000 people there that if the Hebrew University is going to be run according to Torah, there will be a future. If not, it will turn into a den of iniquity. Couldn't see further than his nose. If we wouldn't have had the people who denigrated so Herzl and Rav Kook, there may have been many, many more Jews that would have joined the march to Zion. But it never happened. I can't finish without saying, the world has been electrified. The film clip of the Chafetz Chaim coming to the Knesset Gedola in Vienna in 1923, Gimel El, the whole world. You, of course, noticed he was not wearing the Borsalino. He was wearing his cap. But more than that, I said it in Shir here a few weeks ago, and I immediately wrote it up for my wife and started sending it out. But nobody knows is what happened a few hours later. At the opening session of the Knesset Gedola, one of the speakers, a Rav from Bucharest, made a snide remark about Rav Kook, who was not at the Knesset Gedola, though he was a member of Aguda. He could not leave Eretz Yisrael at the time. The Chafetz Chaim stood up. The 84-year-old man stood up and said, "Mit afreisen Krieg, you have to take Krieg when somebody shames Morod, the Arod, the Yisrael, the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael." And he walked out. He refused. He never came back to the Knesset Gedola. They sent group after group to beg him to return. He refused to return. And when the group that had come from Yerushalayim to the Knesset Gedola in 1923 came to say Shalom Aleichem to the Chafetz Chaim, he said, "I don't say Shalom Aleichem to people who shame Mora, the Arod, the Yisrael, or Rav Kook." You didn't get that part of the story. You didn't get that part of the story. All you know is the Chafetz Chaim arrives at the Knesset Gedola. You know what else you didn't know about that Knesset Gedola? Rav Kook, who could not appear there, sent a letter. And in the letter he suggested that they should bring before the plenum a plan to establish a central yeshiva in Yerushalayim and start telling young men from Europe, come to Yerushalayim to learn. They never raised it. They never raised it. What did they do? So the one great thing to come out of the Knesset Gedola was Rabbi Shapiro's Daf Yomi, and they also agreed to support Rabbi Shapiro's idea of building a great yeshiva in Lublin. And the yeshiva was opened in 1930, and in 1939 the Germans walked in and took it over. And somebody told me, and I checked it out. Or did I check this out? Somebody told me that before he died, Rabbi Meir Shapiro, he died at age 46 or 47 in 1933. Before he died, Rabbi Meir Shapiro said, "I never regretted a thing that I did in my life except for one. Building the yeshiva in Lublin, I should have built it in Yerushalayim." You didn't hear that. All you hear about is the Chafetz Chaim coming, but not about the Chafetz Chaim going. By the way, very fascinating. I'm not going to go into it, but the group from Eretz Yisrael was so embarrassed. They all decided, we're not telling anything. When we come back to Eretz Yisrael, not a word is to be breathed to anybody about it. And they kept it secret for a few years. But there were a few people that, the truth comes out eventually. And it came out. Chafetz Chaim refused to see that. I think that life is has to be a constant search for truth. I personally had a lot of pain for years and searched. I tell you, I searched. All of the stories, just another one or two. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. One of my other heroes in the last few years has been Robert Wistrich. Robert Wistrich is the great historian of the Hebrew University on anti-Semitism. I remember when I went in and bought his first book, it's about 1,300 pages. I walked out of Steinmetzky about 279 shekel poorer, and I weighed down by the weight of Wistrich's book. And then he wrote a second book about the movements of the left, the anti-Semitic movements. I learned two things there, and those two things were awesome. Awesome. One was, at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th, young Jews throughout Europe were joining radical movements. Radical movements. They were anarchists, communists of all sorts. And the one thing that ran like a fine thread through all these movements, in Poland, in Russia, in Germany, a complete and total rejection of Judaism and any Jewish identity at all. And then there appeared on the scene one movement, and that one movement called for a return of Jews to Eretz Yisrael, Zionism. They're going to tell you that Zionism was the Korban of Klal Yisrael. Sheket over. Zionism saved Jewish souls, kept them within the fold. Thousands, tens of thousands were going off to all the Chaleri organizations in the world. And the second thing, this was an issue some years back. The Mufti of Jerusalem, who went to Berlin during the Second World War, sort of made a pact with Hitler, and there were those who blamed the Zionists. Because of the Zionists, the Mufti went and he had to talk Hitler into destroying the Jews, because Hitler was saying, no, me destroy the Jews? No, Adolf, you have to do it. You know, pretty strange way of looking at history. So I learned from him something that just answered so many questions. One of the big questions, the vote of the United Nations. What was that? No, November? Haftet b'November. Haftet b'November. The vote on partition. Russia and all the satellites voted for it. Stalin was an anti-Semit. He remained an anti-Semit. Why in heaven's name did he vote for partition? And it was the vote of Russia and all the satellites that put it over the top. 2 lines in Wistrich's book. During the 30s, Stalin had met with Arab leaders, and there was a movement to bring communism and Islam together. Operation Barbarossa, Hitler invades Russia. And then the Mufti goes to Berlin. Stalin felt that he was being betrayed by somebody who he thought was his friend. He said nothing, but he waited for the moment at which he could take his nekama from the Mufti. And that was the vote on partition. You see what the Rabbi Shalom does? He was already planning 8, 9 years earlier. He was planning the vote in the United Nations. Stalin never forgave the Muslims. Never forgave them, and he was going to exact his pound of flesh. And he did it in the most awesome way possible. And right after the vote, he was still the same Shugana anti-Semit that he was before. But he did his job. Life has to be a search for truth. And there's too much, we're wallowing in too much sheker. Maybe the worst time to talk about that is during an election campaign. Election campaign, all the schmutz all the schmutz is out. But we have to look for truth. And you can find it. You can find it. It's there. History is what we're made of. We are history. We're not only Jewish history, we are world history. We're the most awesome phenomenon in all of history. There's never been a people like us. Haman couldn't understand. Toynbee doesn't understand. Iran doesn't get it either. There's a great Rashi in Yechezkel, chapter 38, pasuk 8. If you ever have a chance, I think this may appear in the book. I don't remember what I wrote in the book. I don't remember what I wrote in the book. I can write another book with all the stuff that I left out. And when I write the second book, I'll be repeating stuff that I wrote in the first because I forgot that I wrote in the first. A pasuk in Yechezkel. The nations of the world are going to come up against Eretz Yisrael to destroy them. And when is this going to happen? If the Jews have been gathered here from all corners of the world. And they're going to be destroyed. And Rashi says, Hoya lachem losim alev. You should have paid attention to the fact. Hamotziyah min ha'amim, the one who took Jews out from amongst all the countries of the world and brought them home here, did not bring them here to give them into your hands. Therefore, you're going to be destroyed. Awesome Rashi. I think it's chapter 38, pasuk 8. You got to see the pasuk, you have to see the Rashi. Jewish history is fascinating. I pity those who cannot thrill to it. If it's the army, this is bad and that's bad. Everything is bad. Everything is bad. Churban Ayados, they're destroying us. They're crushing us. I heard Tarish last week on the radio talking 5 times. You know what Amalek did to us in the last 2 years? Shalom, Shammai, what kind of mouth is this? This is the way you talk about fellow Jews. Shame is a contrite in the whole time. God brought us together here in this country so that we should build a great society. It will not be built on falsehood. And there's so much out there. And there's so much beauty here. But you can only see the beauty if you look for it. I'm sorry, I have to say one more story. One more, that's it. One more story. One more story, that's it. Because this one, I love this one. I don't think I wrote it in the book. Maybe they go into the next one. That's it. And with that, we're closing. I have a lot of books to sign. There was a period of 10 years that I read Yateid Ne'eman. Just like I had a period of 10 years that I read Haaretz. So I got to know them very well. I even reached the point where I could write on demand an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic piece exactly as they would write. For 10 years, I devoted to the Yateid. And I remember it was middle to late 80s, a Thursday, a Syrian MiG-23 crossed over from Syria and landed at Megiddo. Thursday. I told my son Yirmi, you know what the editorial in Yateid tomorrow is going to be? The editorial in Yateid is going to say, big wanted Israel Air Forces. Our Shikra Syrian is able to fly in and avoid all of their radar. No plane went up to take him down. They're useless. They're nothing. They haven't changed. I read to some of my more religious children the editorial this past Yom Ha'atzmaut from Yateid about what's there to celebrate. The army is nothing, and I read it to them, and they were embarrassed. They were embarrassed. So I told my son the following. Tomorrow morning, Friday, there's going to be an editorial saying they're a bunch of losers. They're koichi v'yetzim, they're great, they're nothing. The whole army. Then I told my son, I'm going to tell you what really happened. In heaven, there was a terrible uproar. Michael, Gabriel, the Sraphim, the Chagus, the Ofani HaKodesh came before God Almighty and said, Rabbi Shalom, there's a terrible sakana, the Jewish people are in great danger. The Syrians have the most advanced fighter plane in the world, the MiG-23. And Amcha Yisrael don't know how it works. They don't know how to defend themselves against it. Rabbi, we have to do something about it now. Kinderlich, I know exactly what the problem is. We're working on it. And the Rabbi sends instructions down to our Fasamta Syrian pilot, get into your MiG-23 Haman and start flying to Israel. Instructions go down from heaven, wipe out all Israeli radar for 5 minutes. Give them enough time to cross the border and land at Megiddo. I am convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that's exactly what happened. But then I continued and I told my son, and you know what's going to happen? It was one of those many periods that there was great tension between Washington and Jerusalem. Nothing changes. Every few months there's tension. And this is gonna, the Americans are gonna be thrilled that they have their hands on the MiG-23. Monday morning, the headlines in all the papers, America is thrilled, thanking Israel, they're sharing the secrets of the MiG-23. So it depends how you look at it. If you look at everything negatively, bad, so you convince yourself that everything is bad. You have to look at it the way I look at it. The Rabbi took care of us. He's taking care of us all the time. We are fortunate to be part of his people in his land. And we should be thrilled about it every day of our lives. And don't ever let anybody upset you. Somebody says Narishkeit, there's a one-word answer. Rubbish. That's what the English would do. I want to thank you all very, very much for having come here tonight. Of course, I have to thank my wife, but I thank her in the book. I also thank my son-in-law, Yehuda, who's back there, went over the whole book. Did a tremendous job on the book, but more than anything else, you know who I owe a great debt of gratitude to? And if you see the book, you'll finally see his picture. The dog, Charlie. Charlie. Don't miss Charlie.